If you had told me you thought Fallen was the GOAT IGL a couple of months ago, I would have called you absolutely crazy, because you absolutely would have been crazy if you were making that sort of call. If Furia can keep up the level they're playing at right now, I think the conversation starts back up again. Fallen did win a couple of majors in the past as an op IGL. He did change the style that the game was being played at least a little bit. And obviously this is nearly 10 years ago now, so most people don't remember or understand this. But before that LGSK lineup, things played a little bit differently in terms of, especially on anti-ecos. Teams came up with the idea that you would just play back on bomb sites, you would play crossfires, and ensure that you could trade at all times. And that's still not a bad idea in general, especially if you're playing in a pug where people don't know good execs. But Fallen came in on CT sides, they would play really aggressive on anti-ecos, because if your opponents are on a force, they don't have the utility to take control of early map control and the bomb site. What the hell was that shot? full white Fallen comes through the smoke. Okay. All right. That is insane. Yeah, that's great IGLing right there. Great IGL. That's professional. That's GOAT level IGLing. You know, when you look at anti-ecos, Fallen also dies kind of poorly trying to plant it safely, and he dies to Senzu, which is unfortunate because otherwise they actually would have pretty comfortably won this round. And this actually round, by the way, I want to highlight this part earlier in the round where Yakindar is in ramp and he mollies close, nades out the smoke, and comes through. Actually, in this position, if Fallen is a little further forward, he gets the trade on Mizinho, which is what the plan is if he didn't get full whited by that flash from Blitz. And then this round converts really comfortably. Doesn't need Yuri hitting that insane shot, doesn't even really need Fallen hitting that insane shot. And if Fallen also doesn't die to a player CT here, he's just planting in the middle of the open. It's also a pretty easy round. But if you go back in time and look at LGSK, on their force buys, they had these insane execs where they would go something like 4 or 5 Tech 9s and full utility across the board, or even P250s and full utility. And teams would just give up full control of something like Banana on Inferno. They'd give up full control of mid on Mirage. Maybe not mid on Mirage, but they'd give up full control of areas. You could walk up and go for these insanely effective execs. If you time it right, as the flash is leaving the hand of a player throwing a flash, you can throw a molly and people will die to that molly because they'll be blind as it lands and not realize that it was ever hitting them. And that was, for my memory, basically Fallen. I mean, maybe there were other teams, maybe it came from other teams in Brazil, but that was really what LGSK brought to the scene that furthered the way the game was played, was the understanding that you need to play aggressive against force buys. You can't just give them all the map control they want, or it can be really uncomfortable for you to actually hold the bomb site. But in the time period since then, Fallen hasn't done all that much, and that's why I've been hesitant to say that he's in the GOAT conversation. But there's some really great things happening from Furia right now, and I think this round is a good example of that. They got the kill onto Blitz in Underpass, and they realized, hey, there's a good chance that that was a double up in Underpass. Not only that, but nothing is happening in mid, and there's a ton of utility being thrown at A, as if they're stacking the bomb site. So Caserado and Yakindar were both looking at that flank, waiting for it. They get the kill, and then they do the classics. Freeze. Just stop, don't make any noise, don't do anything. Your opponents, they have to probe, they have to look for something, and then they're gonna have to make a gamble. Now, you have to wait long enough that you actually could have gone back A, right? If they went A few seconds ago, then there still would have been a half rotate, there would have been a player pretty close by. Now, the timing is correct that they easily could have gone back to B, and they hit that same timing. This is the timing they'd be walking out B at, so it's the timing they're walking out A at. Sometimes you wait so long that it actually becomes a bit of a tell that you're not going back B. In this case, they wait the correct, appropriate amount of time, and they get the bomb plant with 7 seconds left and close out the round. And as much as you can sometimes put that type of thing on individuals, and you're going to see some plays in this game where it definitely is on the individuals hitting some shots, there is a level of enabling your individuals to make the plays that they understand to be the right play. Allow them to play off of their read of the game. And sometimes I think people are starting to really pick up on this with the change in Yakindar's play. Some sometimes they're going to throw the round. Sometimes they're going to make mistakes, but you have to put them in situations where they're comfortable. That's how you get the most out of players. And here's a round where, by the way, you're playing against a force buy. If you know it's a force buy here, and they should, I think it's kind of a gimme that Fallen should be flashing into ladder. He flashes connector instead, which means Yakindar walks into ladder and just dies to an MP9. And then that MP9 is going to... Oh, I thought 910 got that kill. It's actually Senzu that... Whoa, narrowly manages to pick up the kill on Fallen. Both players struggling a little bit with that one. And then they end up going for this B hit that's just not really going to get anything done. And in the following round, Yuri has one of the best spawns for Palace, and teams are loving to do this recently where they just walk this Palace player straight forward. Obviously, there's a risk to this. Not only could you get caught from someone jungle, but you could get caught from the player on balcony or just lose that duel. But when you get that frag, it opens up a lot. And when you're looking at Mirage recently, I think it's one of those maps where defaults have become a little less effective when you run them kind of straight up. When you just try and go for mid control into an A hit, teams have really started to fully understand the rotation pattern you need to make to close up the gaps and make any sort of mid to bomb site hit ineffective. Instead, you need to be taking some slight risks, and those are some pretty good risks. Admittedly, I'm thinking in my head that Techno should have been a little more ready for Yakindar in connector there. However, Yakindar, I believe he did come through connector and then they threw a connector smoke. So it looked a little odd there, but if you look at from Techno's POV, the smoke is still up, so he's thinking nobody went through. Maybe he doesn't realize it went down. He's still got to clear that. He's just got to clear that. I mean, no matter what, he has to clear that. Even if Yakindar still gets the kill, it's not the end of the world. It's just, that's just... Honestly, to me, that's just a little lazy. Regardless, allowing individuals to take some risks and putting them in situations to take those risks where you want them to do so, putting them in a spot where you know there's a likely positive outcome is good IGLing. As much as you want to say that the individuals do make their own plays, and sometimes the individuals do call their own shots and it's nothing to do with the IGL, there's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B, and I think Fallen does a good job of getting the most out of his players. The same way Kerrigan often gets the most out of his players, even if his IGLing style isn't necessarily one that you would classically look back at and say, look at all these cool execs, they do these, that's what makes a good, you know, it's more, I guess, modern IGLing where you format where your players are going a little more. But we go into the later parts of the half. I mean, this was a 7-8-4 T side from the Mongols, and they have great T sides in their own right. I think you have to give some credit to Blitz. I think they do a lot of things together really effectively. They have really good team synergy, but I really like Furia's playstyle. I really like their calling. That's why we're looking at Furia. And this is a round where they do go for more of a standard default. They play very slow. They hold way back. And because they have fast, aggressive plays in their playbook, you still have the utility getting thrown out by Mongols. When I watched their game against G2, Mongols in the later parts of the half were just holding on to almost all of their utility into the late round. Here you have Mongols respecting the possibility of a fast play from Furia. And this time around, the reason I pointed out earlier, by the way, this play from Yakindar at ramp, this is a very similar play. They've got the smoke on ramp. This is, by the way, one of the most popular setups right now, where you have a player close ramp, he smokes it off, and then he can watch Palace from just outside the smoke and cover both sides. And that means that you can have a player either default, ticket is very common, or even triple. All of these areas that doesn't have to worry about ramp at all and has a lot of playability. But this Molly helps deal with that a little bit. And because Yakindar had previously came through this smoke, Mizzino has to play very careful with that. He has to be very worried about it. This time around, you have Yakindar, instead of being towards ramp, he's actually towards connector. He makes his way up onto stairs. That prompts the rotate. Senzu was the B player. Now he rotates over to A, and you actually have the play on the other side of the map with Fallen and K Serato moving out Palace, or moving out apartments, and the player coming up short. Maladoy actually picks up a frag, and in the 5v4 with the bomb planted, you already have Mongols just deciding to save here. They just instantly go for a save because they got outmaneuvered so effectively on the map. And there's more to it than just the one round. Fallen really is one of my favorite IGLs when it comes to conditioning and playing halves around a certain play, where this half they played a lot around a very similar concept. All of the strats looked quite similar from the opening. You had players ready for the ramp push. This is something the Mongols like to do. They did it a lot against G2, where they see you going for mid control and they immediately want to push towards an extremity and take you out. Instead, this time around, you've got Yakindar towards B. and they're still ready towards A. Not only that, but after Yekindar gets that kill, Yuri knows it's time. He can take a little space because the pivot towards B is likely coming. 910 starts moving milliseconds before Yuri peeks out, which just gives him that slight edge to get the frag. And this round completely topples. And on paper, you could look at this as individuals from Furia are landing their shots and they're getting frags on individuals from Mongols. But I think that is a very basic way of looking at it. I think the way this half was set up, where Furia were capable of going from a mid default into a variety of different plays, where they were trying to punish that player in towards jungle, in towards window with these plays up connector, and they weren't really doing too much in mid. It's going to play into the last couple rounds of regulation as well and into overtime. But so you come out of the pause and Furia are going to change up the pace. This time around, they go for Molodoy. He had the best spawn. He goes for the peek in mid, grabs the quick kill. Coming out of a pause, you're expecting your opponents to change it up. And I think that's always a kind of clever way to deal with it. Your opponents are, in this case, Mongols. They go for the pause so they can try and deal with the way you've been playing. So you just change things up. The read here, I think, from Fallen and from Furia is that a re-aggression into mid is likely. That's why they're playing so far back. That's why they're doubling up towards the boxes. Because if you think of this from Mongols POV, what have Furia been doing? They've been doing at least a couple of players on the extremity almost every time they go for a hit, with usually only 2 players in towards mid, really. Maybe 3 sometimes, but a lot of the time only 2, and the third player is a little bit further behind, maybe rotating off of B towards T-spawn and picking up the bomb. In this case, you're waiting for this mid re-aggression as Furia, and Yekindar on the other side, he knows that this mid re-aggression is what they're waiting for, so he's empowered to go for this play straight through apartments. He just walks all the way through. He actually, for certain, could have got this kill if he looked the right direction, and it's wild that he didn't even consider looking towards short. In this case, Yekindar, or Quesarado gets the kill on Techno, which basically tells Yekindar, hey, B's empty. And unfortunately for him, his timing, where he's actually way ahead of the timing anyone should have expected, doesn't end up working out. But still, the fact that he got here this quickly allowed him to smoke off short, allowed them to get the quick bomb plant, turns into a 2v2, and they just don't give anything to Mongols. They don't give them an entry back into the round. They smoke off towards short, so there's really nothing that can be done. And eventually, once Mongols try and force in, Yuri's there to shut it down. I think that's another one where, on paper, that's an individual play from Yekindar making his way through the smoke, but the reality is, I think that comes from the idea, we know that there's a very likely call from the Mongols. The odds are high that they're going to go for some aggression in middle. Let's try and punish that, and Yekindar knows he can make the play off of that. Or maybe it's just Yekindar making a great play. It's always possible, but I'm gonna decide it's not. I've decided here. I know Fallen better than he knows himself. That was Fallen telling Yekindar, we're waiting for a mid-aggression. Or, I mean, he might have just said, be careful mid-aggression. Or maybe Techno made some noise jumping or something and I didn't realize it. But still, this round kind of fizzles out. You get the aggression in mid from 910. He picks up the initial kill on Fallen over the smoke, turns it into 2, and at that point, there's really not much you're going to do out of this round. It's basically over. And then the following round, you see, a little more of the same exact thing. You get the initial kill, then you've got the play up through connector, but this time around, 910 is here with the op in hand, just posted up, gets the other kills. This is the part of the half where things can get out of hand. In MR15, things might have gotten out of hand. You get so much money on the CTs. They've got the double op set up. It can actually be quite hard to deal with. And 910 actually somehow completely ready for Quesarado in CT spawn. Okay, but this is the part of the half where things could get out of hand. They've started to understand what your style is, what you're trying to go for in the round, and how do you get the adjustment back? How do Furia turn things around when it comes into overtime? Well, Molodoy's still on the op. He's one of those players that I think can actually really take over T sides with the op more so than most oppers. So many oppers on T side, and for good reason. I mean, that's kind of the way you should be playing the op the majority of the time, is to play more as a supportive element. Make sure that your riflers have the space to go for the plays that they want to. But he is capable of turning that switch and being that player that makes the play for his team to win the round when necessary. That's one of the things I really like about him. But here, Yekindar, all over the map, by the way. He's just everywhere on the map, depending on the round, depending on where Furia want him to be. Gets the jump in a window, and because they've been so quiet on window this entire game, Blitz feels comfortable just leaving. he just completely vacates window. Fallen was already in ladder, so they're allowing Yekindar. I'm certain that they don't expect this to be completely empty. They're probably a little surprised by this, but they know that it's a possibility, especially with the way Blitz ran away from window. Yekindar gets the walk up through jungle. They go for what is a very similar play to the one they went for on the very first gun round, but this time they have nobody in ramp, and Yekindar is just a little further ahead than you're expecting. So Yuri throws the molly, immediately gets the peek onto 910. Then Yekindar knows what the pivot from Mizinho. They know Mizinho is playing close ramp almost every single round. This is one of the downsides. Even if you have a great setup, if you have like a theoretically perfect setup that you can play in a late round against a default, it's still a little risky to be running it too often, because you run into this problem that Furia knew exactly what setup was going to be played there, and usually they have Blitz in jungle. I think the idea from Furia was just, we're going to let Yekindar 1v1 Blitz in jungle, and if he wins, we're going to turn this round instantly. But in this case, it was completely empty. So you end up with the first gun round going the way of Furia. Then you go again for the same boost up in towards mid. You go for Yekindar towards bottom connector again. This time he catches Blitz, throwing that early utility. You know, Mongols are respecting the idea that Fury could be going for some fast plays. Again, I watched the G2 game and they sort of disrespected that at times because they knew that their opponent. In this case, Yekindar he gets a little bit ahead of Techno. Techno's a half step too slow. I'm guessing he thinks he saw that timing. He thinks he caught the timing, but Yekindar was just a little too fast. And actually, Senzu was kind of ready for the possibility. But once more, Yekindar, not the top fragger, actually he's tied for top fragging, but not the top fragger. He's third on the scoreboard despite the kills. He's about to be a first, isn't it? Yekindar, not the top fragger. He's third on the scoreboard. Fallen 6 and 18, my God. Just converts another round just from aggressive play. And this is why, despite Yekindar being, in theory, the third star on Furia, I really think this team does somewhat run through him, in that if he's having a bad game, these plays are going wrong for him, they're going to be really struggling. But then I love this type of changeup. I love this. I just want to take a second. Basket in. The entire game, you're round 29. This is something that Fallen has done a lot because he's played so much MR15, whereas Mongols, they've only come up in MR12. Round 29. Why did I say 29? Round 27. You've gone for mid defaults the entire game. Fallen, Molodoy has no gun. He has no gun. He forgot to buy. Okay, you change things up. You go for a very early exec on A, and I'll tell you what, Mongols are not ready for this at all. But Mizinho throws a perfect smoke, dips behind, and Blitz with the perfect flash manages to get Yekindar just blind enough that he can't kill Mizinho under balcony. And this is a Blitz flash I don't even think is really meant to kill Yekindar here. And Yekindar potentially should have already had the kill on Mizinho. As he's running out here, let's see. Running through, he gets half blind. This might be one where he's full blind on his screen. Sometimes GoTV or Spec TV doesn't quite accurately show you what the players are seeing. But if Yekindar gets that kill, this round converts instantly, and he was in position absolutely to get that kill. And then if you had Molodoy had a gun at the beginning of the round, it may have helped slightly as well for their timings on this play. Instead, the round doesn't go their way, but I really think this was a great call. And when you look at it, oh my God, Molodoy. I'm pretty sure he doesn't win this. That was real close. Real close. Regardless of the outcome of that round, that was a fantastic call from Fallen that Mongols were clearly not ready for. They were very obviously waiting for, or prepared for that mid default or even a fast mid play, but something through mid that Furia had been going for the entire T side up until that point. Then you get into overtime, and this is where Furia, I mean, they got kind of rolled over on their CT side initially. but in OT, they're a little more ready for it. They've got the nade through the smoke. Then Mongols, they hear that first nade and they think they're safe, because a lot of the time you might be waiting for that first nade to actually take control. The second nade pops out. He gets the frag. Yekindar is in good position, and they're not even looking this direction because they smoked it off. This is a flash. If you go back in the video, you will have seen Fallen throw a flash for that angle multiple times. It's a flash most teams aren't throwing. I actually don't see many teams throw that at all, but that's obviously one of the two angles it's really meant for. And then you have the double op come out, and Mongols are trying to change up the pace themselves, right? Go for something a little faster down middle, but Furia are ready for that as well with two ops in middle. The double op in middle, not exactly what you're expecting. Look, I don't think Fallen's the GOAT IGL, and it's hard to make the argument currently with Glaive for championships and Kerrigan for longevity. It's really hard to get an argument against them, but if this Furia roster that just hit #2 on Valve ranking, I believe #1 is Mongols, #2 is Furia, if they could maintain this for a little while, maybe they win a couple of prestige events or something, then the argument might actually be there. But hopefully Fallen can get more than 7 kills in those wins.